I don't really know how to start shows.
Come on now, don't start liking me now.
So yeah, I'm funny compared to, well, you'll see later. I stand for mayhem!
I know a lot of fucking idiots that think a lot of shit is mean-spirited just because it goes against what they believe. But the relief of comedy is it takes things that aren't funny and it allows us to laugh about them for an hour.
We got a purple suit to buy and a gigantic coffin.
Why are you laughing?
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Why Are You Laughing, a history of comedy podcast. And today, I am pleased to introduce to you the Late Night Wars Part 2, Conan O'Brien versus Jay Leno. This one also got ugly about a year ago. If you guys are new to the program, we did Letterman versus Leno. And this publicly, maybe because of the internet and social media and things, possibly got even uglier, at least for the while it was actually happening. But we will dive into it in mere moments. The way we'll start is, if you don't know, Conan started off his late night career very rocky, and we'll hear him talk to Howard Stern in a second, but he mentions how Howard was very good to him in the early days because Howard would have him on when Conan's ratings were abysmal. Conan's kind of like a late night legend now, but he was a writer for SNL and The Simpsons, but no one knew who the fuck he was. He was just a writer. There was no face to him, and you probably wouldn't have even known his name unless you were a real comedy nerd. So when Lorne Michaels decided to put Conan as the host that replaced David Letterman, who was kind of like an institution in that seat, people didn't really understand it. It is strange, though, because Letterman was such a weird guy. The show he did was so different than any late night show that came before him that it's surprising people didn't understand Conan's weirdness at first also, because he's pretty clearly influenced by Letterman, I think. I think there's pretty clear similarities there.
Definitely. The quirky, the snipping of the strings and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I think Conan's a little more self-deprecating, whereas the joke was usually on the guest on Letterman. But there are definitely similarities, but it took the audience a while to adjust. They didn't understand him at first. But after that, he was kind of a phenom. He was doing very well in that time slot. And so then when his contract was up in 2000 or 2001, basically he made it clear to them that eventually he wanted the Tonight Show, and if that wasn't a possibility, then he was going to go somewhere else. And they said to him, "Hey, we want you to have the Tonight Show." I didn't realize that until I was looking into this for this episode, that it was in in 2001, 3 years prior to the clip we're about to play, that they said, "Hey, don't worry about it. You're going to replace Leno. No sweat." And that certainly didn't cause any problems, because then Jay went on the air in 2004, 3 years later, when it was revealed to him that this was the plan. And Jay said this on the Tonight Show once this hit the newspapers.
They said, "Listen, we would like to do 5 more years." I said, "Great. I'd love to do 5 more years." And that was 6 months ago. And then time went by. There's all talk about Conan O'Brien. Will he go to ABC? Will he go to one of these other networks? And they came to me and they said, "We don't want to lose Conan O'Brien." And I said, "Oh, okay, what does that mean?" And they said, we think Conan would be a good replacement, as I do. Conan is a gentleman, funny, the hottest late night guy out there, excellent. And I said, "You know something? I don't want to see Conan go anywhere else. I'm 59. I'll be 59 years old when this leaves. 5 years from now. That's 1,200 shows. I'm not going anywhere tomorrow." And I said, there's really only one person who could have done this into his 60s, and that was Johnny Carson. I think it's fair to say I'm no Johnny Carson. So I called up my buddy, my buddy Jerry Seinfeld. I said, "Jerry, what do you think, And Jerry quit his show when it was the most popular. And I'm proud to say this show has been number one. We will keep it number one. And then in 2009, I'll say, Conan, take it over. It's yours. Because, you can do these things until they carry out on a stretcher, or you can get out when you're still, you're still doing good and think, I'm not quitting show business. But I realize I'm not spending enough time with my cars. But anyway, This is not tomorrow. It's 5 years from today. And I want to say, I don't think there's a better choice. Because, you know, when I took this show over, boy, there was a lot of animosity between me and Dave and who's going to get it. And quite frankly, a lot of what I thought, well, good friendships were permanently damaged. And I don't want to see anybody ever have to go through that again. Because this, you know, this show is like a dynasty. You hold it and then you hand it off to the next person. And I don't want to see all the fighting and all and who's better and nasty things back and forth in the press. So right now, here it is. Conan, it's yours. See you in 5 years, buddy. Okay. Clear enough?
And that was pretty much it. Jay kept his word. Conan took over the Tonight Show, and everyone was very happy. We'll talk to you next week on Why You Laughing. I joke, obviously. Jay said that. Jay's an interesting guy, and I think we talked a lot about this in the Letterman versus Leno episode. There's an element of Jay that I do think he wants people to like him, and I think he wants to make everyone happy, and I think he's a very nice guy. But there is a side to him that's like a shrewd businessman.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll talk a lot about this. Like, he's very prideful of the fact that he doesn't have an agent or a manager. He essentially negotiates for himself. And the reason he's prideful of that is because he doesn't have to deal with the bullshit that comes along with having an agent. And he doesn't have to pay them 10%. But what that means for a guy to be as successful as Jay Leno and make $20 million a year or whatever he was making on The Tonight Show, you do it to be kind of a shrewd guy. Otherwise, NBC could really take advantage of it, which it seems they did not with Leno for the most part. So this 5-year thing was very odd to everyone because obviously, even in that announcement, you hear Jay say like, hey, I don't want the infighting that happened with Johnny, but he never once said, I'd like to retire. I mean, he makes the joke, I'd like to be with my cars, whatever. But he's not like, hey, I'm ready to go now.
He says straight up he's going to stay in show business.
Yeah, right. So yeah, he's almost saying, like, I'll be watching over your shoulder, Conan. And if anything happens, I'm hanging on to this job. So that's kind of an odd scenario. Now, like I mentioned, maybe people went too hard on Jay for this. I don't think it's either guy's fault. Really, I mean, there's things we'll point out over the next hour or so, but this is really NBC's fault because this was butchered right from the beginning. To say, hey, in 5 years, who the fuck knows what's going to happen in 5 years? You know, you don't know what the competition's going to be. You don't know what young kid, maybe, like Seth Meyers does Late Night Now. Who knows who would have hosted Weekend Update during that time? Where you're like, this guy's got it. We need him to be the new Tonight Show host, whatever. So 5 years is very weird. And there were a few people who were very prescient when it came to this. First and foremost was Jay's biggest enemy, his arch nemesis. Not Letterman, but Howard Stern, a guy who really hated Jay. I guess that goes back, maybe we'll do an episode about that at some point. But I guess that goes back to, essentially, I'm not the Stern aficionado that I am with Opie and Anthony. So feel free out there to tweet me or comment on YouTube with corrections. But essentially, I think what it boils down to is there are a few signature bits of Jay's that Howard feels like were stolen from him. So there's always been a lot of animosity. How we talked on the Stuttering John episode about Howard really hating Jay. And that's why this came up a couple of years later when Howard was on Conan, I think in 2006.
I read in the paper that Conan is going to replace Jay Leno, thank God. You think that's really going to happen?
Do I think what?
Do you think that's really going to happen? Do you know, Jay...
I think it's about a 40% chance that's going to happen.
Jay Leno's a funny guy. I read the book Late Shift where they talk about all the different late night hosts, and it said that Jay wanted that job so bad he would hide in closets and listen into the NBC executives talking about his fate, and he wanted the job from Letterman. I don't see this guy leaving and letting you walk in, and I'm concerned about you.
You're concerned. What about me?
This is a big effort.
You know what? I'm very philosophical about it. First of all, it's many years off. I think it's still 11 years away.
Is it?
Jay will be like in his late 80s. I will be like 75 when this thing goes down.
This is a guy who stares at the wall all day, Jay Leno. He waits to go to work. You know, he doesn't like to do anything but work. I don't even know if he has sex with his wife. I don't know what's going on there. So this is going to be very... What do you mean, oh? This is comedy fact. Everybody knows it.
So, I mean, very, very prophetic for Howard to be like, yeah, I don't think this is going to happen, Conan. This is 3-4 years before everything unfolded. The smell was not in the air for this. This was just Howard being like, hey, I think Jay's a snake. Watch your back. I want to point out one more comedy legend that kind of warned Conan about the type of guy he's about to deal with. And that would be one Mr. Jay Leno. So Norm Macdonald was on Conan, as he often was, best guest of Conan ever, as we've pointed out. Mm-hmm. And this is after they announced another bizarre move that we're going to talk a lot about. Jay Leno moving to 10 p.m. So Jay's stepping down from the Tonight Show as Conan takes over, and then it's announced, hey, don't worry, Jay's not going anywhere. You can see him even earlier now, every night of the week. And so this is Norm bringing that up to Conan in his latter days on late night.
And so that's great. And also, it's stunning how Jay Leno outfoxed you again.
Yeah, he's good.
I know. You think, like, everybody's like, oh, I'm Jay Leno. They do the voice and everything. Meanwhile, he's the shrewdest guy. He outfoxed. You're in good company. He outfoxed Johnny Carson. David Letterman. Every 10 years, some redheaded rube shows up.
I'm like some clown off the bus with cardboard suit. Gee golly, this is going to be great.
Yeah, you can have it after me. You go, hey, thanks, Jay. So that's the phone call you got.
Yeah.
Your agent's like, there's good news and bad news. You are doing the Tonight Show. It's true. Mm-hmm. But remember that discussion where you said, I'll never have to follow Leno again?
I mean, Norm's the greatest. We'll hear more from him later. But yeah, it is like Leno's standing in comedy history. His legacy is very strange. Like, there are guys you hear, like Seinfeld is always the example I use, and even Letterman, that really respect his comedy ability. And then you'll hear Bill Hicks, who's like, he's a fucking hack, he's a sellout. And then there's a lot of people that are like, yeah, he's a cutthroat kind of guy. So he's got a bizarre reputation. It'll be interesting to see, like, when he eventually, hopefully it's a long way away, but when he does pass, it'll be interesting to see exactly how he's remembered. Oh, that's right. So this was a little weird. I felt like they could have done more with this. Letterman has had a weird history with Leno. Like, they didn't speak forever. They made no public appearances together. And then they did that Super Bowl commercial with Oprah. Do you remember that?
I don't.
It was like them fighting for the chip. I think it was like a Doritos commercial.
Oh, yes, I do. I do, actually. Yeah.
And so that was like, it was like, holy shit, Leno and Letterman appearing together. That was like a big moment. And so everyone said, well, this opens the door for them to do an interview together. Never happened. And then in the last week of Letterman, everyone said, oh, I bet his last guest is going to be Leno. Because Leno was already out of the Tonight Show by then. Mm-hmm. Didn't happen. Then when Letterman got this Netflix show, people were like, surely he will have Leno on now. It hasn't happened yet. I don't know. So I don't know what their relationship is like. It's very weird. They're diplomatic, but they also hate each other. I don't understand it. But years ago, when I saw that Conan was on Letterman, I expected a little more than this, but this is just a clip of them together.
But you were happy. I'm happy for you that you were happy.
Let me illustrate this. I've known Jay a long, long time. We go back to the mid-'70s, back in Los Angeles at the Comedy Store. Jay was always the guy. The funniest guy. He was the guy. He was the guy you'd go to see. He was the guy you wished you could be more like. He was funny. He was also a bit of a brat. A bit of a brat. And so then... when this came along, I said to myself, oh, yes, this is the Jay I know. And I really, and I kind of, I refer to that period as the golden age of television, really.
The period when I lost the Tonight Show.
Yes.
That brief week and a half period for you is the golden age of broadcasting.
Yes, that's right. But it has nothing to do with you.
Then I'm contented.
He seems like low-key annoyed.
Conan is weird to read sometimes, and you would almost think like, oh, these two together would be great. But it was almost like when you hold two magnets up to each other.
Oh, yeah.
Like they didn't have a lot of chemistry for some reason.
Right. Two options.
It was a little weird. So I don't know. It's not... often I recommend things to go watch, but I feel you can skip that one if you want, if you don't want to watch the Conan Letterman interview.
Yeah, definitely skippable for sure. This next one, though, definitely not.
Oh, no, this is one of my favorite clips ever. We played it in the Norm on Conan episode, but I felt like it was worth playing once, any excuse, really. It was worth playing once again. Like I said, Conan had some fun in the latter days of The Tonight Show. And this is one thing. I always wonder with this stuff, does Norm call Conan and say, or the head writer or whatever, and say, I have an idea? Or do they say, will you come do this? I'm always curious how that works exactly.
I don't think they're funny enough to make this basket.
Well, yeah, I think the letter is even better. So this is a gift that Norm gave Conan on The Tonight Show.
Well, for you to bring a basket commemorating...
Just the idea that he would write miserable failure is not enough. Calling the guy a miserable failure to his face
is very funny.
Oh, yeah. So that's one of my favorite Norm clips ever, honestly. Just because of the situation and how big that was at the time. For Norm to come on and do that, I think is hilarious.
How he didn't break, I'll never understand.
He's the greatest.